In the crumbling kingdom of Oakhaven, the enormity of the suffering was impossible to ignore. For years, the ruthless King Malakor had chosen to deprive his people of basic needs to fund his endless wars. The once thriving villages were now destitute, leaving families to starve in the streets. A terrible famine had swept across the land, but the granaries in the capital remained full, locked away from the hungry masses. Elara, a former soldier turned rebel, looked at the hollow eyes of the children in her village. She understood their plight. It was a daily struggle just to survive. The violence of the king's guards was a constant shadow. They would frequently trespass into private homes and intrude upon peaceful gatherings, looking for any sign of dissent. They would seize whatever little food the farmers had managed to grow. It was clear that the king did not care if he had to violate every moral law to maintain his power. Elara knew she faced a terrible dilemma. If she stayed silent, her people would die slowly. If she fought back, she risked immediate death. But as she watched a guard beat an old man for hiding a loaf of bread, the decision was made. The threat of death was no longer enough to keep her quiet. Elara gathered her most trusted allies in the cellar of an abandoned mill. It was time to form a conspiracy to overthrow the tyrant. "We cannot let him invade our lives anymore," Elara whispered, the candlelight making the determination in her eyes twinkle. "We must plan a raid on the royal arsenal. We need weapons." "It is a pitfall," warned Kale, a blacksmith who had lost his shop. "The arsenal is heavily guarded. To attack it is suicide." "It is a dangerous mission," Elara admitted. "But we have no choice. The king prepares to deploy his new legion to the south. If we don't strike now, we lose our chance." They spent the night debating the conflict. They knew that simply rushing in would lead to failure. They needed a distraction. They needed to prepare meticulously. Kale finally agreed to help equip the rebels. He promised to provide whatever metal scraps he could forge into tools of war. They would not just be a mob, they would be an army. Over the next week, the underground movement began to grow. Kale worked the forge day and night. He did not have modern machinery, so he had to strike the hot iron with a heavy hammer until his muscles burned. He fashioned a sharp sword for Elara and a heavy axe for his brother. For others, he made the spear and the shield, traditional weapons that were still deadly in capable hands. Meanwhile, the hunters in the group began to craft the bow and arrow. They were silent weapons, perfect for taking out sentries. However, they knew that steel and wood were not enough against the king's elite forces. They needed something stronger. They needed gunpowder. They managed to steal several crates of black powder from a supply caravan. It was a risky theft, but necessary. Along with the powder, they found a crate of outdated firearms, a rusty pistol, an old rifle, and a box of heavy lead bullet ammunition. "We must teach the villagers how to use these," Elara said, handing a helmet to a young boy who had volunteered. "Every weapon counts." The night of the campaign arrived. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, providing the darkness they needed. The target was the northern gate, where the king's munitions were stored. Elara's heart pounded. She watched a guard light a cigarette. The brief spark illuminated his bored face. "Wait for the signal flare," she whispered to her team. Suddenly, a bright red light shot up into the sky, creating a glitter against the dark clouds. "Now!" Elara shouted. The archers released a volley. Every arrow found its target. The rebels rushed forward. Kale used his hammer to punch through the wooden barricades. A soldier tried to stab Elara, but she managed to deflect the blade with her sword and counterattacked with a swift chop. The alarm bells began to ring. The element of surprise was fading. They had to move fast. The king's forces responded with overwhelming firepower. A cannon rolled out onto the ramparts. "Get down!" Kale screamed. The blast was deafening. A massive explosion tore through the ground near them. The sheer burst of energy knocked Elara off her feet. Dirt and debris flew everywhere. The enemy began to bombard their position. "They are trying to explode the bridge," Elara realized. "We have to stop that cannon." She grabbed a bag of gunpowder. "Cover me!" Bullets whizzed past her head like angry hornets. She sprinted toward the wall. A guard aimed his rifle, but an arrow from the shadows took him down. Elara threw the bag near the cannon's ammunition supply and lit the fuse. She dove behind a shield just as the flame caught the powder. Boom! The secondary explosion destroyed the cannon and the wall beneath it. The shockwave felt like a physical punch to the chest. Chaos erupted. The rebels poured through the breach. It was a brutal battle. Soldiers and rebels were locked in a deadly dance. Elara saw a guard trying to beat a fallen rebel. She rushed in to help. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of sulfur. A missile, a flaming projectile from a catapult, crashed into a nearby tower, causing it to collapse. Elara found herself face to face with the captain of the guard. He was fully armored. He swung a massive mace, trying to strike her down. Elara dodged, feeling the wind of the weapon pass her face. It was a struggle of speed versus strength. She saw an opening. As he raised his arm, she used the hilt of her sword to strike his helmet, disorienting him, and then kicked him back. "Surrender!" she yelled. "We do not wish to pursue this slaughter if you lay down your arms." The captain looked around. The fortress was burning. The enormity of their loss was clear. The rebels had taken the gate. The king's soldiers, realizing they were fighting starving men and women who had nothing left to lose, began to drop their weapons. The sun began to rise, its light making the morning dew twinkle on the grass, now stained with the signs of war. The silence that followed the blast and the screaming was profound. They had managed to pursue their freedom and win. The threat of the king was not gone forever, but his grip had loosened. Elara stood atop the ruined wall. She was exhausted, bruised, and dirty, but she smiled. They had refused to let the king violate their dignity any longer. They had faced the pitfall of fear and jumped over it. This was not just a raid, it was the start of a revolution. The spark they lit that night would grow into a fire that would cleanse the entire kingdom.